Alright, y'all, today is a work day because of a family death in Eddie's family. So thoughts and prayers with him and all that jazz. But continuing the theme of Suicide Awareness Month and Mental Health Month, because as you know, I'm a huge mental health advocate, I thought I would go ahead and share some more of my conversation with my friend Ngozi, who is a mental health professional, a real mental health professional. And yeah, tune into the conversation. We talk about Black Boy Joy, and what else do we talk about? Just a feeling of supporting mental health for everyone, including men, especially men, and giving space for everyone to talk about their feelings. So, that said, there's a conversation. Love you all.
Online communities. I do think they work. I was listening to a podcast from, and now I'm blanking on the guy who wrote this. He wrote this book on like depression and rethinking the way we view anxiety and depression. It was an Ezra Klein podcast, and now I can't remember the guy's name. But I know it was an Ezra Klein podcast. But he talked about like the research he had done on how like people with depression would go into these communities where like you can have it's a dead zone. You can't have your phone. And that would help them to reset. Like that would improve their depression.
Okay, all right.
And I was like, okay, interesting. But then there was another study that showed that people who suffer from depression but play these like RPG video games with a team, or like the hunt and gather kind of games, where like you're on a team together and you guys have to go and fight this other team, also showed decrease in depression symptoms, because being on a team helps them to feel that social connection.
Yeah.
And then the video game aspect of like hunting for something, like giving them a goal and a purpose, all that ties into like how we decrease depression symptoms.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is fascinating.
It's all about connecting, and so like connecting in the game, since the team building is actually fostering connection,
Yeah.
whereas being depressed and by yourself on just social media, like
Exactly.
that's not connecting.
So I was like, I mean, I guess it would be good for the agoraphobic or the person who, for whatever reason, can't get out of their house.
Yeah.
Like if you're like stuck in your, because you physically can't get out. And that would help you to manage those symptoms, which is great. But at the same time, I do wonder if we put too much emphasis on that, because, boys love their RPGs.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But men, I think, also have the hardest time building those social connections.
I think that's a very interesting discussion, men's mental health in this country, and how we leave very little room for men to express emotions, except for anger. And so a lot of the work I see going forward is basically teaching men about emotion. Like,
For sure.
I had to learn about my own emotions before I started transitioning.
For sure. And that's something, too, that I'm a really big advocate of. I tell my guy friends all the time, hey, it's okay to be upset about it. It's okay to have emotions. And I try to use emotional language with them so they can have permission to use emotional language back. But yes, especially Black men's mental health, we don't talk about it. And mental health has become, I'm not sure why, gendered, in that we think mental health and self-care are only for women. But everybody has mental health, and everybody needs self-care, because everyone has a self.
Right, yeah. But it's like everybody's got a heart. Like, if you got a heart beating, you need to
take care of yourself.
Yes.
Please. So, but yes, exactly. We live in a society where men are taught to be stoic and not show emotion and not be vulnerable. And I will always think all the time, I get to think about generations of men before who have suffered through that pain. And what we're teaching the future generation of men now, and that's how we end up with that toxic masculinity issue, because they feel like they're always having to put on a persona. But it locks you out from being loved for who you are.
Yeah.
And then, but everyone wants to be loved. It doesn't matter what gender you are. Everyone wants to be loved for who they are as an individual. And if you constantly feel like you have to put on a personality, the person is not loving your full self.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine being in a relationship with somebody, whether that's like a long-term relationship or just a friendship, where you're never yourself. That has got to be one of the most lonely ways to live your life. So I think about it all the time. I think about like men's mental health. I'm like, but they never get to be themselves or have their true personality seen and be loved as who they are. And to go your whole life like that?
That's
tough.
Absolutely. It's saddening.
Yes. And I imagine it to be very painful, like just emotionally painful to, like, the idea that when you walk into a room, you know that these people don't really care about you. They just care about what you can do for them.
Yeah. Mm.
And I say painful, just not necessarily in physical pain, but like the emotional pain that
isolation, like that sort of pain, like, and that in itself presents weird physical symptoms too.
Yes, exactly. And that's when I think that's why we see a lot of that anger come up. It's not anger. I mean, a lot of people say anger is a secondary emotion, and I think sometimes it can be, but I think a lot of times the anger we see in men is just that frustration of they just want to be themselves.
Yeah.
But we live in a society where they're told they're not allowed to, and the weight of having to be all things to all people. It's gotta be tough.
Or just the weight of being on constantly. Like, as an actor, like, I can actively tell when I'm on and when I'm off. And so if I'm off too long, it's like, I need a break from being on.
And I feel like that's how we end up seeing, you know, these crazy behaviors from men.
Mm-hmm.
Or I won't use the word crazy, but these extreme and erratic behaviors, right? The man who just one day walks out on his family.
Right.
But was like
it's so much pressure.
But was a great dad or provider before, but now he's just gone. And it's like, well, yeah, you got tired. You just get tired.
And it's like figuring out what's sustainable. I have found myself really loving the term blackboyjoy because I remember watching something and it said joy and extreme sadness are one of the two hardest emotions to be expressed around people, and we experience such shame with them.
Yes.
But it's so much easier to cry in front of someone to experience pure joy.
Yes.
So when I see the hashtag blackboyjoy and I see black men showing joy, it's just
happy. Yes.
It makes me tear. Like it's just one of the best things in the world. And
yes.
Not to bring it a downer, but seeing Elijah McClain shot down, or just when he was just showcasing so much black boy joy.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, for sure. And also, that's another thing too, right? You know, I think people don't realize that black men and black women experience racism differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I can't imagine what it'd be like to be a black man in America, constantly watching people who look like you killed in the streets, and hashtag after hashtag.
And not on top of what we just talked about, like a whole different layer of.
But then, you know, because just watching it for myself as a black woman, because I'm imagining my brothers, my cousins, my future sons, and I'm angry. I'm broke. I'm sad, like depressed. And this is not necessarily like it's not my face on that body. For black men to see that, are y'all not angry? Are y'all not sad? Are y'all not depressed? I mean, I see the anger part come out because I'm sure you're tired of this.
Mm-hmm.
But does it not make you scared too? Does it not make you sad that like this might be the story because you have a whole life,
right? That
when you die gets boiled down to the last 3 minutes of your life. Where is the outlet for them to process the whole range of emotions that comes with that? And how do we help them feel comfortable and confident enough to be able to be that vulnerable to say, yeah, this is how I feel when that kind of stuff happens. And it's okay to cry about it.
Yeah.
Because pain leads to tears just as much as joy does. But it's the vulnerability piece of getting black men to be comfortable enough to be truly vulnerable. Because I feel like social media makes us think people are vulnerable because they post their whole life on there. But that's not.
It's performative.
Yes.
And that's the horrible thing about social media is that it can lead you to be very performative and saying, I'm living this amazing life and I'm so fabulous, when it's like, I'm actually miserable inside.
Yes. And so like, to tie it back into the Black Boy Joy thing is that what has really helped, like I love seeing black men be like together.
Yeah.
And to be friends and to just be enjoying life and like laughing and joking. And then God, if they have kids, I'm over the moon. I love it. Because I feel like it's normal for women to congregate. Mm-hmm. That's a thing. But for black men to be open enough to be like, no, I love that dude.
Yeah.
And to say they enjoy being together and to laugh and to have all of that. Like, I'm like, y'all need this.
Yes.
Like, you need a retreat. When I get married to a man, I want him to go on your little buddy retreats. Get out of my house.
Right.
Go with your little friends.
Take time for you. Like, being in a relationship, it's it's work, but it's not the hardest of work. Like, it's very easy. Like, you are your couple, and then you are still two individual people.
Yeah.
And you still need to do things, take self-care.
Exactly.
And sometimes that is alone time away from the person you love the most.
Exactly. So I just, my biggest desire would be to, as we're all in this conversation now, as mental health has become much more talked about and open, that we are bringing Black men into this conversation and centering them in this conversation of, okay, what does mental health look like for y'all? Because I even, it's the same way that racism looks differently for Black men and Black women, I'm sure mental health will look differently for them as well. So what do y'all need? How do we help you? And how do we support you in that? And I mean, I'm definitely seeing a lot more Black men become therapists, which is great.
It's so funny you go to that point, because I was about to bring up that point of more Black men therapists.
We need that.
Just like you need more Black male teachers in schools and modeling that behavior, because even in my own experience in going through mental health, it wasn't until I came across Rico, a Black gay male, who it was like, we good. Like, you get me? There's not these weird microaggressions while I'm trying to help myself. It's like, you get it. And and that's so important too. I think, and I was having this conversation with a friend of mine who's white, and they were like, they didn't understand why we were pushing for representation so much in media.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, you're a white male. Where have you ever gone where you didn't see yourself?
Right. Like, we're going to drop you in Africa and maybe you'll see something different.
And I was like, but when you see somebody who looks like you doing something, it gives you permission that you too can do this.
Yeah.
And that is really important. I love seeing Black people do things that are not what normal for us to do. Which, I'm always like, we've been doing this for years, for centuries. We've always done this. But the dominant culture had us tricked thinking that this is not what Black people do. But I love watching folks love like anime and like Pokemon and all that. Run it. Be happy. Go to your Comic-Con.
I want you to meet two friends of mine, Melissa and Brian, and they call themselves blerds.
Yes.
And they had a whole wedding, and at each different table, it was about some different. One was a Harry Potter table, one was something else.
Nice.
Like, they are through and through blerds, and I love them so much. And
But like, enjoy whatever you want to enjoy.
Yes.
You like NASCAR? Run it, baby. Whatever makes you happy.
He loves pumpkin spice latte, and it's just like, because you not gonna say a word.
I support you.
Right, and she loves horror movies and everything bloody, and it's just like, y'all are,
I support you.
all of it. All of it.
I want to, but actually this would tie into what we're saying with the Black best friend, right? So this is also kind of where I got frustrated.
Oh, okay.
With her narrative.
All right, we're gonna take a pause right there. We're gonna come back to this. We're gonna get the good stuff started.